Hello, classroom children. Good morning. Today is Monday, and as per the routine, you have English paper 2 or English literature to continue through online class. And hope you all are safe and fine at home, and also carrying on with your regular studies and viewing all those tutorial videos provided to you by all the subject teachers. Please carry on very sincerely and do all your works as per the time uh, you are getting, because right now you are at home and with ample time to prepare for yourself. And to tell you, before we catch what we were doing in our last class, um, you might have gone through or heard the council notice that keeping in the view of the pandemic that we are suffering, the council has decided to reduce some of the chapters from your syllabus. Uh, so, from the Tempest, a drama by William Shakespeare, it is a complete textbook, Act 1 to Act 5, and we have no worry because we have already completed the textbook um, in this, drama, right? And moving on to prose, collection of stories, uh, one chapter is omitted from your syllabus, that is chapter number 4, to build a fire, right? So this chapter is omitted in your syllabus. And from poetry also we have one poem omitted in the syllabus, that is Birches, poem number 2, Birches. So these two chapters are reduced in your syllabus, right? So in fact we have not done this story to build a fire, and also not discuss the poem Birches. So these two chapters are already reduced in our syllabus, right? So once again, from the textbook drama, The Tempest, we are to complete the whole textbook, and we have already completed. And from stories, one chapter is omitted, that is chapter number 4, to build a fire. And from poem, uh, one chapter is omitted, one poem is omitted, that is poem number 2, chapter number 2, Birches, right? So rest all others we already have in our syllabus. And regarding your English 1, uh, all the questions are same as what we have been doing. There is no omission of any of the chapters or any other questions in our English language. However, there are no, lesser number of questions will be asked in the paper, like in your comprehension, in place of 5 to 6 questions based on the comprehension, you will be asked only 3 questions or 4 questions on it, right? Even the word meanings, there used to be 5 and 4 or 4 and 5. Now it is reduced to 3 and 3, right? So the number of questions are reduced. However, the varieties of the questions asked in language is same as what we have been doing. So please do not omit any of the chapters in language. Whatever we are doing it, take those all exercises compulsory in our part or in our practice, right? So hope you understood. And today let us continue with the story that we were using in our last online class. We have switched on to our next textbook, which is our Echoes, a collection of short stories. And we saw the starting of the story, B.Wordsworth, by Sir Vidyadhar Surasprasad, Nepal, right? So that was the story that we had to begin in our last class. In this story, the author so far has told about the problems of the poets and authors adjusting their living in the world, in this very fast growing world. Uh, the author perhaps is wanting to um, give us the picture of the life of such people living in this world, right? So in the story B. Wordsworth, here B. Wordsworth, B stands for black, as we have come to know in this story, and here V is Nepal, who is commonly known in the world, V is Nepal. Uh, the narrator is a small boy, and the story takes place in a Miguel Street in Port of Spain, in Trinidad. And we saw uh, the friendship just started between B. Wordsworth and the narrator boy, right? Miguel Street is such a street where you see every day there is the coming of a beggar, right? And you see uh, uh, beggars of uh, different problems do appear at the house, and they are given this and that by the people, and then they leave, right? Similarly, one day a very strange person came at the house of the narrator, and we saw the person was not a beggar, like, because he was well dressed, a very gentle look, and he spoke well English, right? And he wanted to get inside the yard of the narrator's house, right? Because he wanted to see the bees inside the yard, right? The narrator went inside, consulted his mother. Mother came out, and she allowed the person to get in and watch the bees. But she also warned her son, the narrator, to keep an eye on this man till he watches the bees and goes by, right? So mother went in. The talk between the two started, right? And we notice here that the man introduced himself, okay, as a poet, and he said that he's one of the greatest poets in the world, right? And he took out a poem written on mother, and he offered the narrator boy to purchase, and he said that he would be giving the poem at a very bargain rate, right? Just 4 cents, right? The boy, being eager, went inside and told his mother that if mother wished to buy a poem for him, right? Um, but the mother, you see, came out wild with anger, right? She was very furious, and then after chased them and hurled at the man, right? Telling that he should leave now, right? And she has no money, right? So this is the problem of the poet, who write beautiful poems, but they are not sold, right? There are hardly any buyers in the society wherever they go to sell their poems, right? Now you see the friendship between the two again grew stronger when you see one day uh, B. Wordsworth was waiting for the narrator's return from the school, right? And when the narrator returned from the school in his school uniform itself, here he went to B. Wordsworth's house, because B. Wordsworth told that he had mangoes ripen in his home yard, right? So there he went, and he munched 6 of the juicy mangoes, right? Staining his uniform with all juices of the mango. And when quite late, the boy returned home. The mother told the narrator, go and get the whip for her, right? And when the narrator went and got a cane, a stick, or a whip, and with that same cane, with the same stick, the mother beat the boy, the narrator, the son, so badly, right? Finally, the boy ran out of home, saying that he would never come back, right? And when he came back out of house, when he came out of house, he then straight away headed to meet his friend B. Wordsworth, right? And there he sat, and B. Wordsworth tried to comfort him, and he told, "Let's go for a walk," right? And now, what happened in the walk, right? That was the part we had dropped last time. From here we continue. So here we go. So we are on page 119. See the last paragraph to continue. B. Wordsworth said, Now let us lie on the grass and look up at the sky. And I want you to think how far those stars are from us. So you see, they went to St. Clair Avenue, they went to Savannah, right? Um, and finally they came and sat on the grass, right? And when they lied themselves on the grass, here it is also the evening time, right? And the poet B.Wordsworth told the narrator to look up at the sky and uh, tell and he talked about the stars. Right now, what happens from here? We continue. So see, on page 120. I did as he told me, and I saw what he meant. I felt like nothing, and at the same time, I had never felt so big and great in all my life. I forgot all my anger and all my tears and all the blues. So see how comforting here the narrator felt when he was with his newly built friend Beaversworth, right? No doubt there is an age difference between the two, but friendship can exist in any difference of ages. Now you see, so I did as he told me. So Beaversworth told me to look up at the stars, right? And just told me to think how far these stars are from us, right? And I did as he told me. I looked up at the stars in heaven, and I saw what he meant, right? And I tried to understand what he actually wanted to tell me. I felt like nothing, and at the same time, I had never felt so big and great in my life. And that very moment, Natter felt here that so changed in himself, so different in himself, right? I forgot all my anger. I was very angry with my mother, right? That she beat me mercilessly, right? And I was in tears when I came out of my house, right? I forgot all that anger, right? I forgot all the tears, right? And I forgot all the blows of my mother that she beat me with the whip, right? When I said I was better, he began telling me the names of the stars. And now, after the time passed by, Beaversworth asked me to tell me about those stars, right? And how am I feeling now? And I told him, right? The narrator told the poet that he was feeling better now, right? Much better than earlier. He began telling me the names of the stars, and he began to teach me the different shapes and looks of the stars in heaven, right? And he taught me the names of those stars. And I particularly remembered the constellation of Orion the Hunter, right? And particularly, right, specifically, I remembered the group of stars, collection of stars, the constellation of stars known as Orion the Hunter, right? Orion is the group of stars. He particularly told me about this, right? And I remembered, right, for quite a long time. Though I don't really know why, I can spot Orion even today, but I have forgotten the rest, right? And he himself could not understand why did he remember Orion the Hunter, and he forgot all of the names of the stars, right, in heaven, right? So still today, here the narrator says that he could spot, he could identify, he could specify, he could clearly tell Orion, right, the hunter, right? The rest of the stars, the rest of the names of the group of stars, he has forgotten. Then a light was flashed in our faces. Suddenly, what happened? A light got flashed on our faces, and we saw a policeman. And when we looked, we found there stood a policeman who was on his duty. We got up from the grass. So, seeing the policeman, we now got up from the grass because whenever you see a policeman, he would definitely question you, he would definitely ask you what he was doing here, right? So, we also got alerted and we sat on the grass, right? Seeing the policeman, said, "What are you doing here?" No. And he had the same question asked because he was on his whistling duty, he was on his watch, what the people were doing at night and on the grass and outside of the house. The policeman asked, "What are you doing here?" Beaversworth said. Beaversworth replied, "I have been asking myself the same question for 40 years, right?" And he told the policeman that the same question he had been asking for himself for 40 years. That means it's quite a long time that Beaversworth was, I mean, um, living with such you can say question, right? Because it also tells okay about his age, that he is now plus 40, right? We became friends, Beaversworth and I. After that, the narrator and Beaversworth became close friends, right? He told me, you must never tell anybody about me and about the mango tree and the coconut tree and the plum tree. And he told me that I should never disclose what he had in his house surrounding or in his house veranda, right? Uh, you must keep that a secret. And he told me that I should keep these all top secret. If you tell anybody, I will know because I'm a poet. And he also warned me, indirectly warned me, telling that, right, if I had told this about him to anybody, then he would very, you can say, quickly come to know about what I had done, right? Because he's a poet, and being a poet, writing the poem, he then visits uh, people around selling his poem, and he would be definitely told by someone, right? So that's why he told the narrator that he should not disclose this fact to anybody, right? I gave my word and I kept it, and I promised him, the narrator promised Beaversworth that he would never disclose the secret, right? And he of course kept it a secret. I liked his little room. Thereafter we returned to his home, right? That was a hut. I entered in, or we both entered in his little room. It was a little room. It had no more furniture than George's front room, and it had not many furniture kept in the room, not even more than his friend, narrator's friend named George, who had a small room and less furniture, right? But it looked cleaner and healthier. But B. Wordsworth's room looked cleaner and healthier, hygienic. It looked hygienic, neat and tidy. But it also looked lonely. But inside it looked very lonely, as if something is missing, right? One day I asked him. Likewise, I began to pay a visit to my new friend, right? On times. Whenever I had time in my routine, I used to give a visit to my new friend, right? So one day what happened? One day I asked him, Mr. Wordsworth, why you does keep all this bush in your yard, right? So outside the house or the hut, there were the the land was kept very untidy. All tall trees, fruit trees, this trees, that trees, grasses growing here and there. They are not, mended. They are not, you can say, weeded. All are growing here and there. So I asked him, why do you keep all this bush in your yard? I asked Bigglesworth, and it does make the place damp. And I asked him, right, does it not make the place dirty, right? Does it not make the place dirty, leaving all those things growing here and there? Why? Uh, well, you should have cut these. You should have weeded those unwanted grasses and made this yard look beautiful, right? But he said, "What do you see?" Beaversworth said. He said, "Listen, my dear child, my dear friend, and I'll tell you a story. Right? Let me tell you a story." He said, "Once upon a time, a boy and girl met each other, and they fell in love." Beaversworth told a story to the narrator. Once upon a time, a girl and boy met each other, and when they met, they fell in love with each other. They loved each other so much they got married. Now you see, they loved each other so much that they got tied into knots. Right? That means they got married. They were both poets, and both of them were poets. Right? He poet and she poet. He loved words, and he poet loved words because he is a poet. She loved grass and flowers and trees, and she poet loved grass and flowers and trees growing in the yard. They lived happily in a single room, right? And then one day the girl poet said to the boy poet, "We are going to have another poet in the family," right? So they lived happily, right, in a small room, in that small room, in that little room. And one day the girl poet said to the boy poet, right, well, we are going to have another poet in the family. That means a new person is going to be born, which means that the sea poet was pregnant, right? But this poet was never born. But look at the sadness, right? The new poet never came, right, in the family because the girl died, because the girl poet died, right? It was a very disappointing thing that happened, in this poet's family, right? And the young poet died with her. And since the young poet was not born, right, yet to be born, so he was in the womb, the mother's womb. So when the mother died, the baby also died inside her, right, inside her. And the girl's husband was very sad, and the boy poet became very, very sad thereafter, after having lost two of his very precious beings in his life. And he said he would never touch a thing in the girl's garden. And thereafter he made a promise to himself that I would never touch anything in the garden, right? Because the girl poet used to like flowers, grass, trees, yes or no, the beautiful nature, right? So after the demise of the girl poet, the wife, right, along with the child in the womb of the mother, right, the boy poet never wanted to cut uh, the grasses, the flowers, the trees from the garden. And so the garden remained and grew high and wild, and so the garden remained like what it was. So tall trees became tall, the grasses grew here and there, right? It was unkempt, it was kept in like a mess, unattending. No gardener was there to look after it, right? So after listening to this story, I looked at B.Wordsworth, right? Then I looked at B.Wordsworth, and as he told me this lovely story, he seemed to grow older, right? And I looked at his face and I found that he was also growing older, like what he told about the boy pot in the poem, in the story. I understood his story. Then the narrator understood B was for the story. That whoever story he told just now, who narrated to him just now, it is none other than B was with himself, right? We went for long walks together. Thereafter, we went for long walks as usually they used to do. We went to the botanical gardens and the rock gardens. We climbed Chancellor Hill in the late afternoon and watched the darkness fall on Port of Spain. Port of Spain is the capital of Trinidad and Tobago. And watched the lights go on in the city and on the ships in the harbor. Harbor is the port, right? And they used to sit on the altitude, and they used to watch the ships coming and resting in the harbor or in the port, right? So they used to have lovely time shared between the two, right? The two became very fast friends, right? Unmindful of their uh, ages, right? Because you saw the poet B. Wordsworth was 40 years and above, and the boy is a school-going child, right? The narrator is a school-going child. But look at the friendship between the two. Now see, he did everything as though he were doing it for the first time in his life, and he did everything as if he's doing it for the first time in his life, as if he's learning first time, right? He did everything as though he were doing some church rite, and he did it everything as if he's doing uh, some church rite. Rite means some church ceremony, because whenever you are in the church and doing your church ceremony, you are pious. You are completely involved there. There is no hanky panky. There is no fake, right? There's no. So he was very diehard of what he was doing. He was very sincere of what he was doing. He would say to me, then he would say to me, now, how about having some ice cream? And sometimes he used to tell me, right, my dear friend, little boy, so what do you think of, right, ice cream? Do you wish to have ice cream? He used to ask. And when I said yes, and after all, a child would definitely be fond of, right, taking ice cream. So I said yes. He would grow very serious and say, and then he would become very serious, and then he would say me, now, which cafe shall we patronize? That means which cafe shall we go? Which cafe shall we be obliged? Where do you want to go to get or to buy ice cream? As though it were a very important thing, as if it is a very important thing, right? Important, not the ice cream. Important, it is shop or the cafe where it is sold, right? You would think for some time about it and finally say, I think I'll go and negotiate the purchase with that shop, right? And after all, he used to think and then, okay, say to me, the narrator, let me go and negotiate. Negotiate means to bargain, to discuss and to arrive at the conclusion, right? That he would bargain the purchase, he would bargain the price of the ice cream, and then he would buy the ice cream for him, right? So this is where we have come to know how difficult is the life of a poet, right, to adjust his living in the world, right? He is a poet and he's penniless, right? He has no money, right? And when the small boy wished to have ice cream, saying yes, right? And now the question becomes, how is it going to be afforded to this boy, right? So he said that he would go and bargain the price of the ice cream for this boy, right? So see, the world became a most exciting place for whom? For the narrator to live in, because right, he's now got a new friend, and with whom he spends his time walking here, walking there, going for a walk. Thereafter, buying those ice creams at at a bargain rate. Yes or no? So now he's enjoying his life. The narrator is enjoying his life, right? One day, when I was in his yard, he said to me, right, I have a great secret which I am now going to tell you. So one day in our meeting, right, when we were seated in his yard, he then told me, I have a great secret. He has something, a secret, and he is now going to tell what the secret is, right? I said, it really secret? Then I asked him, later asked B.Wordsworth, is it really a secret that he wishes to share with him? At the moment, yes. And poet B.Wordsworth said, yes. At that juncture, at that point of time, it is a secret, right? He told. I looked at him, right? And he looked at me. Both of them looked at each other. He said, this is just between you and me. Remember, I am writing a poem. And he told, this is just between, right, the two beings, right? And he told me to remember that he should not disclose this secret to anybody, right? And what was the secret? We were so told that he is writing a poem, right? Oh, I was disappointed. The narrator thought something else, right? Something else could be the secret that he is wanting to share with him, but he found it is a poem that he is writing. So he was quite disappointed, not happy to hear this. He said, but this is a different sort of poem. But Beaver said, right, seeing the facial expression of seeing the countenance of the narrator, that he is not happy to know what secret is, right, when he has come to know that it's only a poem that he is writing. Then he told, maybe Beaver said, but this is a different sort of poem, not the usual kind of poem that I'm writing, right, or that you have read somewhere. This is the greatest poem in the world, he said, right? And I whistled, and thereafter I whistled, right? To take it on either side, either to consider it really very, very important, that what he is going to tell me, or taking it so lightly, what he is going to tell me, right? So he whistled. He said, I have been working on it for more than 5 years now. And he told, right, what kind of poem that he is writing. He is writing this poem since 5 years, right? He told. And it's more than 5 years. I will finish it in about 22 years. And look at the target. He's going to complete this poem in 22 years, right? Another 22 years. So that means he's going to take to write this poem about 30 years, right? From now, he said. That is, if I keep on writing at the present rate. And he told that if I keep writing the poem line at a present speed, then I'm making myself sure that I'll be completing it in the next 22 years, he said, right? You just write a lot, then I asked, then I asked, that means you write a whole lot, the lines of the poem to complete in 22 years, he said. Then the poet said, not anymore, he said. I just write one line a month. And he told the secret that he writes one line a month. That means in 1 month he writes only one line. In 30 days he writes only one line. But I make sure it is a good line. But whatever line that I write, right, it's a very, very good line. If you just read it once, you will understand, right? You like it, you love it. I asked, what was last month's good line? Okay, then tell me, what was last month's good line that you wrote? Right? Then I had to ask the poet. He looked up at the sky and said, right, the past is deep, he said. That was the line I wrote last month. Right? I said, it's a beautiful line. Then the writer applauded, complimented, saying that it is a very good line that you have written. Right? B.Wordsworth said, I hope to distill the experiences of the whole month into that single line of poetry. Now what did he say? B.Wordsworth said, I hope to distill. Distill means to get the essence of, to get the importance of the experiences of whole month into that single line that he writes. Right? That means out of so many experiences in a month, right, he scrutinizes all those experiences and then takes out the best line that he could write for his poem. Right? That is what he does, he said. No? So in 22 years, I shall have written a poem that will sing it to all humanity. And in the next 22 years, I shall have written a poem which every man in the whole world will read it and like it and love it. He said. I was filled with wonder. Hearing this, then I was filled with wonderment. Right? He was waiting, eagerly waiting now when these 22 years will go rolling by so that he would read the poems written by B.Wordsworth. Our walks continued. We walked along the seawall at dockside one day, and I said, Mr. Wordsworth, if I drop this pin in the water, you think it will float? Right? So once what happened? The two friends were walking right on the seaside or a seawall at dockside, right? And I asked B. Wordsworth, right, Mr. Wordsworth, would you mind if I tell you, right? He picked up a pin, a metal, right, and then asked him, if I drop this into water, will it sink or will it float? He asked. B. Wordsworth told me, this is a strange world. This world is very strange. You can't predict what happens next to you. Drop your pin and let us see what will happen. So what do? You drop it in the water, right? And then let us see what will happen, whether it will float or sink. That means B. Wordsworth is wanting to make the boy or to understand what the boy is wanting to tell, right? That he should be practical, right? He should be practical. Don't depend on others what they said, right? Do what you want to do it and prove it yourself that what you have done, right? So be practical, he said. Okay, so take the pin, drop it into water, and then let's wait and see whether it will sink or float, right? The pin sank. The boy picked up a pin and then he dropped into water, right? And it's natural, the pin sank, right? The pin sank, right? I said, how is the poem this month, right? So, and then the narrator asked the poet, how is the line of this month, right? He asked about the poem that he was writing. But he never told me any other line. But he did not say me the new line to me. He simply said me, oh, it comes, it comes. So he just said, oh, it comes. That means I haven't thought that good line to be written. So when it comes, it will come. And then perhaps, okay, I'll tell you. He said, or we would sit on the seawall and watch the liners come into the harbor. And sometimes we used to sit on the seawall and then have to wait and see the liners. Liners are the passenger ships coming and going in the harbor. But of the greatest poem in the world, I heard no more. But what greatest poem that he was writing, right? I did not hear any more lines from him. I felt he was growing older, and when I looked at him once, right, I found he was growing older, right? He started having wrinkles on his face. The sign that was there on his face was vanishing, disappearing slowly. I noticed this on his face. How you does live, Mr. Wordsworth? I asked him one day. And one day I asked Mr. Wordsworth, right? So how do you make your living? Right? That means how do you earn your living? How do you earn money? Right? That supports you. I asked him once. He said, you mean how I get money? And then he told me, right? Did you mean to say that how I earn money? How do I get money? He asked, right? When I nodded and when I said yes, that's what I am questioning you. That's what I want to know, right? How do you earn money? How do you earn your living? Right? He laughed in a crooked way, and he laughed, right, looking at me in a very crooked way. Crooked way means in a very dishonest manner, as if he's uh, uh, as if he's insulting me on that question. Right? He said, I sing calypsos in the calypso season, and he told me, right, I sing calypsos. Calypsos are the Caribbean songs, right? It is sung by the group of singers, right, during the Calypsonian season, he said, right? And that lasts you the rest of the year. And I asked him, and that is going to keep you alive uh, the the whole season, right? And then again you will sing it okay the next season, right? I asked him. Then he told me it is enough. So he told me, yes, it is enough. What do I earn singing calypsos, right? That is enough for me to run my life for a year, right? He said, right? But you will be the richest man in the world when you write the greatest poem. Then I told him, right? So you are going to be the richest man on the world, in this world, when you have written that greatest poem that you are writing. I asked him. He didn't reply, right? He kept silent. He didn't tell me anything. Okay? And that's it. One day, when I went to see him in his little house, so likewise days pass, right? Months passed, right? We became closer and closer every day. We became deeper and deeper in our friendship, right? So one day, when I went to see him in his little house, I found him lying on his little bed. What did I see? I saw B.Wordsworth was lying on his bed, right? He looked so old and so weak that I found myself wanting to cry. When I looked at his face, he looked so old and he looked so weak. He looked so thin. And I found myself that I should set into tears looking at him. I was wanting to cry. I could not bear to see him in that condition. He said, the poem is not going well. And what did he say? Perhaps the narrator asked how he got the poem, right? And Beaversworth said, the poem is not going well, right? It's not doing pretty. It's not doing on well. He wasn't looking at me. And when it was talking to me, he was not looking at me. Who other times was doing this, right? He was looking other sides. He was looking through the window at the coconut tree. And he was speaking as though I wasn't there, right? So that means Beaversworth was talking all alone, as if he was talking all alone, and he perhaps was not knowing that the boy has come in and looking at him. That was the way how he responded. He said, when I was 20, I felt the power within myself. And he said, so when I was 20 years old, right, I had the power in me, right? He told, then almost in front of my eyes, I could see his face growing older and more tired. And when I looked at him, and you see, right, how the time has changed, right? I could see this clearly in his eyes. His face was growing older and he looked tired and more tired. He said, but that was a long time ago. And he said, but that 20 years was a long time back, he said, right? And then I felt so keenly, and then I felt it so keenly, and then I felt it so eagerly, right? It was as though I had been slapped by my mother, as if, I had been beaten by my mother, slapped by my mother, right? So suddenly there was a jerk in me, right? I could see it clearly on his face. It was there for everyone to see, death on the shrinking face. And I could see this on his face. And if any man would have seen this poet, Wordsworth, right, every man would have thought the same, right? What was the common thought? Death on the shrinking face. That means death is now seen on his thinning face, right? Shrinking means thinning, becoming thin and thin, right? He looked at me and saw my tears and sat up. So he looked at me and saw I was uh, in full of tears to see him in that condition. And then he sat. He said, come. I went and sat on his knees. And then he beckoned me, he called me, and he made me sit on his laps. I sat on his knees. He looked into my eyes and he said, oh, you can say it too. I always knew you had the poet's eye. And he looked into my eyes and said, right, that you can see it, right? Like, what do I see, right? I always knew that you are another poet, right? Going to be a future poet, he told me. He didn't even look sad, and that made me burst out crying loudly. And he did not seem sad, though he's now nearing his death. He did not look sad, right? And that made me cry loudly. That made me burst into tears, right? I could not control myself singing. He pulled me to his thin chest and said, and then he drew me towards his chest. He embraced me. He hugged me. Do you want me to tell you a funny story? He then said, do you want me to tell, right, a funny story? Funny story in the sense, a strange story? He told. And he smiled encouragingly at me. And he smiled at me so that I could come out of that disappointment that I was feeling, right? He tried to encourage me, right, to throw back my all sadness uh, and be happy to listen to him, right? But he couldn't reply. But I couldn't reply, right? But I was unable to say. I was unable to reply because I was really feeling so pain at looking at him. He said, when I have finished this story, I want you to promise that he will go away and never come back to see me. Do you promise? And then he told me, right? So when I have finished telling you this story, right, I want you to promise that you will go away from here, right? And you will never come to see me, right? Do you promise this? Beaversworth asked the narrator, right? So in these lines, we feel that there is a denial, right, uh, of we can say deliberately making the boy that he should stay away from being a poet, because the poets have no life, right? At the present times, a poet has no life to live, right? You have to suffer a lot. There's a lot of pain to become a poet, right? Because there's no buyer who buys the poems, right? So that is why here the poet Wordsworth is seen telling the boy, right? Promise me, right? You will never come back to see me, right? And you'll go back to your home and never come back, right? He told. So he's trying to dissuade the young boy to grow up to be like a poet, like him, right? So see, I nodded, and then I nodded, saying yes, right? I will follow what you say. He said, good, right? Well, listen. That story I told you about the poet and the girl poet, do you remember that? Then Wordsworth told me, do you remember that story which I told you, right? About the girl poet and the boy poet, right? He said, that wasn't true. That story was exactly false. It wasn't true. He said, I just concocted, I just made up and told you. It was something I just made up, he told, right? So all this talk about poetry and the greatest poem in the world, that wasn't true either. And all those poems, all this poetry and the greatest poem that I'm writing, right? The poem which is going to be the greatest in the world is also false, is also not true, right? I just told you, right? He said, isn't that the funniest thing you have heard? And then he asked, isn't that the strangest thing you have heard so far? He asked, right? But his voice broke, right? And slowly what happened? Wordsworth's voice started breaking, right? That means he's now dying, right? So what does this mean? What does this mean? It means that Wordsworth actually didn't want the boy to suffer like him, becoming a poet, because the poet has no life, right? It is a very hard life to live, right? Becoming a poet, because there is no prestige, there is no respect, and there is no money, right? So that's why he told this. I left the house. Then after I left the house, then I had to leave the house and ran home crying like a poet for everything I saw, right? So he then ran to his home, crying and crying, tears in his eyes, right? Whatever he saw. Then days pass, months pass, years roll by, right? Then what happened? You see, I walked along Alberta Street a year later. So 1 year later, what happened? I went in the same street, right? Alberta Street, where my uh, friend, right, Wordsworth lived. But I could find no sign of the poet's house. When I reached there, I saw no house of his, right? There was no housing. There was no small housing. It hadn't vanished. So it couldn't vanish anywhere. It couldn't disappear anywhere like that. I was quite surprised to see. Just like that, it had been pulled down, right? Actually, what had happened to that house? It was completely demolished. It was pulled down. It was broken, right? Down by somebody. So it was pulled down. It was demolished, and a big two-storied building and had taken its place. And in place of the small house where once Wordsworth lived, right, there is now a two-storied concrete building made, right, in that place. The mango tree, the plum tree, and the coconut tree had all been cut down. All the fruit trees are all cut down, right? And it became an empty place where once it was like a small forest. It was like wood, and there was brick and concrete everywhere. And there were bricks kept, there were concrete things kept everywhere. That means more constructions are yet to be done, right? Now it is not the same place what it was a year ago, where once Wordsworth lived in this Alberta Street, right? So it was just as though Wordsworth had never existed. And when I saw this change, I felt as if Wordsworth had never existed. Wordsworth had never lived, right? That was the scene in just a span of 1 year, right? So the story states here that, right, uh, old values such as love, devotion, sincerity, sensitivity, and so on have disappeared in this new harsh world, right? So there is no uh, sincere things available in this world today, right? Everything has vanished, right? People have now changed so much, and they are changing so much, that in place of such a beautiful nature, right, once it was, now there are tall storied being made, storied buildings are made, right? There are concrete things kept, right? So people have no love for such natural aspects, right? And there is no respect to these kind of people who are poets, authors living in this world, right? That's why the poet Wordsworth told the narrator, right? Promise me you will never come back to see, right? That means he doesn't want him to become like what he had become, right? He doesn't want to see the narrator become like him as a poet and suffer like him, the life of pain, right? And that's why he dissuaded him from becoming a poet, right? So this is what we have come to know in this story, B. Wordsworth. Hope you have understood, right? So this is the completion of the chapter, B. Wordsworth. Note on this will be passed on to you shortly, right? So stay safe, stay fine. Thank you very much.